The city beneath the red trees. Njoro was not just any city. It lived and breathed beneath a canopy of tall red trees, their leaves glowing like embers even in the brightest sun. The people called it the heart of the forest, for Njoro sat in the middle of land so ancient that the roots of the trees were said to whisper secrets to the ground. In this place, laughter often filled the air. Children raced through markets, and traders shouted over ripe fruits and shiny metalwork. Drums stomped at dusk, and dancers painted in colors of the earth moved like waves through the dust. Life was good. But not for everyone. Seedling Tono the Silent. Tono lived on the edge of Njoro, in a small hut beside the old well. He was only 17 seasons old, tall for his age, with quiet eyes that always seemed to be listening. Or maybe waiting. They said he had no parents. Some whispered he had been found as a baby in the hollow of a red tree, wrapped in vines. Others said his mother had died in childbirth and his father had vanished into the jungle. Either way, Tono grew up alone, raised by the kind-hearted blacksmith Bika, who treated him more like a tool than a son. But Tono had one dream: he wanted to be a warrior. Not just to fight, but to protect. He trained alone in the mornings, using a carved wooden spear he'd made himself. While others laughed at his silence, Tono watched. And learned. Emila the listener. Across the city, Emila lived with her grandmother in a house of woven vines and clay jars. She was 16, with a laugh that could make plants bloom. And maybe, they did. Emila was known as a healer. She collected herbs and roots from deep in the forest, and somehow, the plants seemed to respond to her. When someone was sick, her touch cooled fevers. When animals were wounded, they sought her out. But what few knew, what only her grandmother truly believed, was that Emila could hear the trees. Not just rustling or wind, but actual voices. Whispers. She didn't know why. But she knew to listen. And lately, those voices had gone quiet. Classical building Chief Modi. Njoro's leader, Chief Modi, was respected by all. He was a tall man with silver in his beard and fire in his eyes. A warrior in his youth, now a thoughtful ruler. But age weighed on him, especially since the strange signs had begun. First, the river that ran through Njoro began to dry. Not all at once, but slowly, as if it were afraid. Then the birds, bright, noisy, ever-present, vanished from the trees. Then the sunsets turned a strange color. Not orange. Not red. But copper, like old blood. Modi knew stories. Old ones. But he dared not speak them aloud. Not yet. Oda adored the traveler and the warning. It was a cool evening when the traveler arrived. He came wrapped in rags, leaning on a crooked stick, with white paint on his face and toes bare despite the rocky road. He didn't ask for food. He asked for the chief. They brought him to the great fire pit in the center of the city, where Modi waited. The people gathered around, curious. The traveler didn't speak for a long time. He stared into the flames, unmoving. Then, in a voice like dry leaves, he said, "It has returned." The silence fell. Chief Modi stepped forward. "What has returned, old one?" The traveler turned his head, his eyes milky but wide with fear. "Momba Montu. The spirit serpent. The curse that sleeps beneath the forest floor." Murmurs ran through the crowd. That name had not been spoken in many years. Some laughed nervously. Some crossed themselves. The traveler continued, "I walked 3 days through jungle that did not speak. The birds are gone. The river turns to dust. Even the wind is afraid. You must prepare, chief. The old wound has opened. And the blood will run." He fell silent after that. No one saw where he went the next morning. Paw prints, the first signs. The warnings might have been ignored if not for what followed. Within a week, The hunters who ventured out came back empty-handed. Or not at all. Then, Emila found a wild deer lying dead near the forest edge, no wounds, no blood, just burned. As if something hot had slithered across it. And then, on the fifth night, Njoro stood on the hill behind the city and saw it, the sky at sunset, glowing a deep, unnatural copper. The clouds twisted into strange shapes, like scales. And somewhere beyond the trees, a low sound echoed. Not thunder. A hiss. Whispers in the jungle. The jungle was no longer quiet, it was watching. At first, people thought it was just the dry season playing tricks. But when the hunters failed to return, and the dogs refused to enter the woods, the people of Njoro began to whisper. Fear doesn't shout. It hums. Low and steady. And in Njoro, it had become a song in every heart. Magnifying glass tilted left Njoro and Emila venture in. Njoro stood outside the market with his spear slung over his back. His eyes were locked on the tree line where the wind didn't seem to blow anymore. Emila walked up beside him, carrying a small bag of herbs and a pouch of ash for protection. You're going in, aren't you? She asked. He nodded. Good, she said simply. You need a healer. Njoro opened his mouth to protest, but stopped. Arguing with Emila was like trying to reason with rain. Useless, but somehow refreshing. Together, they stepped into the jungle. Evergreen tree into the breathing wild. It was hotter beneath the canopy. The red leaves above trapped the heat, and the forest floor smelled of rot and old secrets. As they moved deeper, the usual sounds, birds, insects, frogs, faded. In their place came something worse, silence. And then they saw it. A patch of crushed earth. Trees bent unnaturally to one side. Deep grooves in the dirt, like scars made by something massive dragging itself across the jungle. Njoro knelt beside one. His hand fit easily into the groove, but there was space for 5 more of his. Scales, Emila whispered, staring at something nearby. A small antelope lay twisted, its body blackened as if by fire, but no flames had touched the grass. Its eyes were wide open. Mouth frozen mid-scream. What could do this? She asked. Njoro didn't answer. But in the stillness, he heard it, not words, but something moving, slow, heavy, deliberate. They didn't wait to see more. They ran. Oda adored the legend of Mamba Montu. Back in Njoro, they sought out Shale, a man so old he claimed to remember when the first chief was a boy. He lived alone on the hill, surrounded by charms made of bones, feathers, and whispers. When they told him what they saw, the old man grew pale. Mamba Montu, he said. The forest remembers. They leaned in as he began to speak. Long ago, before Njoro stood, this land was ruled by spirits. Mamba Montu was the greatest of them, a guardian serpent the size of 7 trees. It protected the river, the crops, and the people. In return, the people honored it. They brought gifts to the hearthstone and sang the songs of peace. But time makes men greedy. One chief wanted more land. Another wanted gold from the hills. They dug into sacred places, broke the old laws, and ignored the warnings. Mamba Montu became angry. Its eyes turned red. Its hiss could shake the ground. To save the people, a great warrior named Luma offered his life. He gave himself willingly, and with his blood, they sealed Mamba Montu beneath the hearthstone, not to kill it, but to silence it. Forever. He paused. But nothing sleeps forever. Milky Way Emila's vision. That night, Emila tossed and turned. In her dreams, the trees whispered her name. She walked through the forest in a fog, barefoot, wearing a robe made of leaves. In front of her stood the hearthstone, cracked down the middle. From beneath it rose Mamba Montu. It was vast, glowing with green and silver light. But its eyes, were full of sadness. Not rage. Not hunger. But betrayal. And in the distance, she saw men, digging, laughing, pulling gold from the ground with greedy hands. They struck the stone with sharp tools, and the cracks deepened. The serpent rose not out of hatred, but pain. She woke up breathless. Truth unearthed. The next day, she and Tono returned to Elder Michel and told him what she had seen. The miners, Emilia said. The ones beyond the North Reach. They are digging into sacred ground. That's why the serpent is awake. Tono clenched his jaw. We have to stop them. Michel looked at the two young faces in front of him and nodded slowly. You are not warriors. Not yet. But the forest has chosen you. If Mamba Montu rises fully, there will be no Ngaya left to save. The awakening of Mamba Montu. There are moments in history when the world seems to hold its breath. When silence doesn't bring peace. It brings dread. Ngaya was in one of those moments. When in crescent moon the crimson eclipse. It began at midday. The sun climbed to its peak, and then, without warning, the light began to fade. Not slowly, not like dusk, but like someone snuffed it out. Children pointed to the sky. The moon is eating the sun, they cried. But this wasn't just an eclipse. This was an omen. Above Ngaya, the sky turned a deep, burning crimson. Birds scattered in twisted patterns. Trees moaned in the wind. And from the earth came a rumble, low and slow, like the forest exhaling after holding in a terrible truth. The ground near the hearthstone cracked, and then exploded. From it rose Mamba Montu. Snake the beast revealed. It was unlike anything the people had seen, even in legend. A serpent longer than 10 trees, its scales glimmering like jade dipped in starlight. Every move it made shimmered with unnatural grace. Its eyes burned, not just red, but knowing. Like it remembered everything. The earth quaked as it moved. Houses near the forest edge collapsed. Crops turned to ash with a single breath of the serpent's hiss. People screamed. Some ran. Some fell to their knees and prayed. But none could look away. Ngaya was no longer a city. It was prey. Drop of blood, a leader falls. Chief Modi stood on the city wall, bow in hand. His voice rang out, to arms. Defend the people. He loosed a single arrow, true and fast. It bounced harmlessly off the serpent's shimmering body. Mamba Montu turned its head and struck, not with fangs, but with its tail. The impact shattered stone and bone alike. Modi fell. Gasps rippled through the city like aftershocks. The chief, their leader, their strength, was down. And just like that, panic took root. Shield Tono stands tall. In the center of the chaos, Tono stood frozen. Around him, people screamed and fled. Warriors clashed over who should lead. The elders wept for the chief. But Tono, orphan of the red trees, had only one thing, the serpent's hiss. And something else. His own heartbeat. He climbed the steps of the elders' platform, raised his broken spear high, and shouted, "If we run, we die. If we fight, we might live. But Ngaya, our home, will stand." Something shifted in the crowd. The other young warriors looked at him. They saw not a boy, but a flame. One by one, they followed. Droplet Emilia and the spirit of the river. But strength alone wouldn't stop Mamba Montu. Emilia knew that. She could feel it in her bones, in the way the trees trembled when the serpent moved. So she went where the living still whispered, the river. Or what was left of it. She knelt by the dry riverbed, crushed herbs in her palm, and sang the old song, the one her grandmother taught her when she was 5 and scared of thunderstorms. Nothing. She sang louder. Still nothing. Finally, as tears fell into the cracked mud, she whispered, "Please. If there is still a spirit left in this land, we need you now. The riverbed shimmered. From the earth rose a shape, fluid and glowing. The spirit of the river, once strong, now thin and flickering like a dying candle. You call me, child, it said, voice like water over stone. Emila bowed. The old curse has awakened. Mamba Monto walks again. The spirit nodded slowly. The balance is broken. And blood alone cannot fix what greed has opened. But there is still power, if you are willing to pay the price. Emila swallowed. Anything. Crossed swords the clash. Tono led the warriors into the street just as the serpent turned back toward the city's heart. He aimed his spear, crafted from hardwood and hope, and charged. With a roar, the others followed. The spear struck. It shattered. Mamba Monto didn't even flinch. With a single sweep of its massive tail, it knocked half the fighters to the ground. Tono rolled to the side, breath knocked from his lungs. His eyes met the serpent's, burning, ancient, furious. He had never felt so small. And yet, he stood again. Behind him, the few still standing formed a loose circle. Their weapons shook. But they stayed. The song of the earth. The earth trembled beneath Njoro. But deep in the forest, far from crumbling homes and falling spears, there was a different kind of trembling, one that began not in fear, but in awakening. Emila had entered the sacred grove. Deciduous tree, the grove of trials. It was said that only the chosen could find the grove, hidden beyond the river of echoes where roots grew in spirals and the trees bent inward like bowing elders. The air here was thick with memory. The forest felt alive, but not like the jungle. This was older. Wiser. Emila stood barefoot at the grove's heart, surrounded by massive stone pillars carved with ancient glyphs and overgrown with moss. The wind here didn't blow, it hummed. She knelt and placed both palms on the mossy ground. I am Emila, daughter of Njoro. I come in peace. I come in need. The earth paused once beneath her hands. Then the trial began. Sparkles the earth song. Darkness closed around her. Not fear, but silence. Complete and ancient. Then came the voices, not words, but feelings. The trees. The soil. The bones of the mountain. They sang of time, of harmony broken, of wounds left open. You speak to the forest, child, said a voice deep and soft, like a drum under the earth. But can you sing with it? A vine rose from the ground, coiling like a snake. It touched her chest. Suddenly, she saw Mamba Monto, not as a monster, but as a guardian. She felt its pain, its confusion, its betrayal when humans once turned against it, digging into sacred land and sealing it away like a villain. The spirit within the serpent was not evil, it was wounded. Emila reached deep into herself, pulled breath from belly, memory from bone, and sang. The song that came wasn't from her lips, it came from the earth through her. A low, melodic chant that vibrated the very ground. Trees leaned closer. The wind stilled. Even the stones seemed to hum along. When it was done, her hands glowed faintly with green light. She had learned the earth song, a melody that could calm, bind, or even heal ancient spirits. But only if sung with truth. The blade of Muiha. Elsewhere, Tono wandered the jungle, lost and bleeding from the last battle. He didn't know why his feet carried him forward. Only that something ancient was guiding him. He stumbled upon a ring of stones, each carved with symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the dark. At the center, embedded in the root of an enormous tree, lay a blade, not of steel, but of crystal and bark, humming with quiet power. He reached out. A vision flashed before him, warriors of old, standing side by side, their hands joined. Not one hero. Many. Not one story. 1,000 voices in harmony. Tono grasped the hilt. The blade paused, light ran through its veins like water over stone. This was the blade of Mwiha, forged in unity, fed by courage, and sharpened by trust. A weapon that grew stronger the more hearts stood behind it. Handshake, reunion and resolution. Tono and Emila met again beneath the sacred fig tree, where they'd once played as children. He carried the blade. She carried the song. They didn't need many words. "We have to fight," said Tono. "Yes," said Emila. "But not just with spears." Together, they returned to the city. Classical building Njaya prepares. Word spread quickly. The serpent would return. This time, for good. But Njaya would not fall quietly. Tono trained the youth. Not just to fight, but to stand. To stand together. Emila taught the elders the rhythm of the earth song. Drums were made. Flutes carved. The sound of unity rose through the ruins like sunrise through fog. Old ways met new. Fear turned to resolve. And in the center of the city, at the broken heart stone where Momba Montu had once been sealed, the people of Ngai gathered. Not as prey. Not as victims. But as a people. Ready, the final echo. The sky cracked open above Njaya. Thunder roared across the mountains, but it wasn't from the clouds. It was the roar of Momba Montu, rising like a storm from the jungle, silver and jade scales glowing beneath the burning sky, its massive coils crushing trees like twigs. The air pulsed with heat. The earth trembled beneath its weight. And Njaya, battered but unbroken, stood waiting. Shield the final stand. Tono stood at the front, the blade of Mwiha in hand. Around him, warriors stood shoulder to shoulder. Not just soldiers, farmers, weavers, drummers, hunters. United. Armed. Ready. Behind them, Emila stood before the hearthstone, flanked by the elders and musicians. Her eyes were calm, but her hands trembled. The earth song pulsed inside her like a second heartbeat. As Momba Montu emerged into full view, the crowd gasped. It was even larger than before, its red eyes glowing with fury and confusion. It opened its mouth wide, ready to strike. Tono ran straight toward it. Cyclone the distraction. He shouted, waved his arms, rolled through the dust, anything to draw its focus. The beast turned its enormous head toward him, hissing like an earthquake. Tono darted between its coils, slashing at its side. The blade sparked, but did not cut. The serpent lunged. He dove aside just in time, landing hard on his back, but buying precious seconds. Musical notes, the earth song awakens. Emila inhaled. Then she sang. It wasn't a song of war or defiance, but of memory. Of rivers that once sang through valleys. Of trees that whispered old names. Of a serpent once loved. Of peace broken, not by monsters, but by men. The earth song rang out, layered in rhythm and voice. Drums joined. The wind paused. Even the flames at the edge of the city flickered and bowed. Momba Montu stopped moving. Its head lifted. Its body stilled. Its eyes softened. And then it remembered. Tornado visions of the past. The serpent saw itself once more as protector. Twining through waterfalls, resting beneath moonlight, surrounded by people who danced, not feared. It saw betrayal, greedy men digging, sacred ground torn open. It saw pain, fury, exile. But now, it felt something else. A voice. A warmth. A truth. Emila's song reached it. And it wept, not with tears, but with light. Dagger the blade meets the stone. Tono stood once more, battered, bloodied, but burning with purpose. He ran to the hearthstone, where Emila still sang. The blade of Mwiha paused in his grip. As if guided by every voice, every heartbeat behind him, he raised it high and drove it deep into the crack at the stone center. For a moment, time stilled. Then, light exploded. Golden and green, it surged through the serpent, through the people, through the very soil of Ngaya. Not fire. Not destruction. Peace. The serpent roared, once, twice, and then began to fade. Its body dissolved into light, scales drifting like leaves. Its spirit, no longer twisted by pain, rose into the sky like mist at dawn. And then it was gone. Classical building legacy of light. Days passed. The city healed. Where the hard stone once cracked, a new monument stood. Not just of Tono, standing tall with the blade of Mwiha. Not just of Emila, arms raised mid-song. But of Momba Montu, coiled in peace, carved from green stone and surrounded by growing trees. Children were taught not to fear the serpent, but to understand it. The earth song became part of their schooling. Greed was no longer celebrated, balance was. Ngaya remembered. And in that memory, it found strength. Sunrise Epilogue, the echo lives on. Sometimes, when the wind is just right, and the leaves dance with the moon, you can hear the faint hum of a song. Not just in the trees, but in the earth itself. The final echo.